All right, what's up? What do you got?
Oh, just slushing around in the snow and slush. That's it. That's all I got. That's all I've been doing.
You want to talk about snow and slush? Is that the topic you're throwing out there?
No, that's just all I got. What have you been doing? Any fun adventures? Things happening?
No ventures.
I just realized what the date is today.
Yeah, what is today's date?
It's January 6th.
Sweet.
And I just went, doesn't something happen today?
Yeah.
What happens today?
Today is a certification of the electoral votes. They and they come into Washington D.C. and they certify them, and now it's proper. The process is done.
Now it's officially official.
It's officially official.
Can anything happen to make it not official on this date? Or
there's still some stupidity that can. Let's bring that up. Our system is very traditional, right? Mm-hmm. And we do weird things like why would we need 3 months to certify an election, right? So November is the election, and then this long span of time where lots of crazy things can happen into January.
Yeah.
Why do we need so much time? I'll take a guess.
Yeah.
All right.
So they're hoping something happens? I don't know.
No, I'm not going that tinfoil hatty today.
Yeah.
So the electors were in their states, and horse and buggy was the way that you got to Washington, and trains, right? So it needed to give you 2 months to be able to get back into D.C. and cast those electoral votes in Congress, right? Mm-hmm. But now we don't need that. Like, we've got light speed. We can take some of these traditional processes and shrink them down to need. Maybe there's a legal reason why. Maybe there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes to allow the certification to happen on today's day that needs and requires a bunch of time. I did see this, that California needs a good 2 months to be able to count their votes, kind of thing. Yeah, just a little jab at the process. But anytime something takes a really long time to happen, it lends itself into really bad actors from having a big chance at taking something and disturbing that.
Yeah.
And so I wish that they would shrink it down. Now, hopefully, if I had extra time on something, I would do extra due diligence to make sure it was even more accurate or more likely to happen. But I don't necessarily think that happens with that, club of people. I think they take advantage of vulnerabilities in a system and make it worse, not better.
If, God forbid, something were to happen to a candidate in that time frame, or what if they were just like, you know what, I'm backing out, I don't want to do this anymore, who then takes over? Does just the current president stay, or what happens?
Well, I think the ticket has been elected, and so the vice president would just assume the role of president, and
okay,
probably
so they stay with it.
The vice president either would be, I don't know if it's a selection process where now the president would be able to then pick, or if it's part of Congress's time to take the Speaker of the House and make them vice president. I don't know how that would go. Let's not contemplate that, because we don't need that, right?
God forbid, yes.
Yeah,
we don't need to get any hairier than it already has been. Yeah.
And then Justin Trudeau today resigned from Canada, so the governor...
I did not see this!
The governor of the 51st state of the United States has now resigned. Canada's a freaking mess. It really is. And I'm not a big fan of Trudeau. I'm not a big fan of his politics or the politics in Canada in general, but I think this is Trump did a fair bit of shit posting at Trudeau, and I brought up the 51st state because that really got his goat a little bit with a disrespect to the place that Canada holds. I thought that was really good, but it feels almost like that disturbance caused a cascade effect where maybe it was connected to his resignation and the acknowledgement that they're not doing so great up there. So.
Wow, I just recently saw a video online. I don't even know who the guy was, but he claimed to be someone who lives in Canada or is from Canada. And he was like, everybody thinks it's so great here. And he's like, have you ever looked at the crime rate of Canada? It's ridiculous. And he's like, we got free healthcare. That's great. You need a doctor? 5 to 6 months is what you're waiting to get in to see any kind of doctor. I'm like, holy crap. And he was like, all these different things he was saying about how everyone's like, oh, it's so terrible here. I'm going to Canada. And he's like, yeah, by all means, come see. The grass is not greener over here. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to Canada?
Oh, yeah. Bunch of times.
You like it?
I established my blackjack career in Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
You have a blackjack career?
Had a blackjack career. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Were you like those guys that like wear the glasses and...
No, blackjack.
I know that's poker, but...
So didn't have to wear the glasses. But when I was, late teens, had no money, would go up to Casino Niagara just about every Friday. And I would play blackjack for a couple hours till I got up by like between $500 and $1,000, and then we'd bail on blackjack and go enjoy the city. And we did this every freaking week. Driving up there with just enough money and gas and $20 to get everything started and go win at some blackjack. Yeah,
I went one time with some friends in college. We went just for the night, and I don't think we did anything. We went to an Applebee's, which I'm like, we can do that anywhere. Why wouldn't we go somewhere that's, unique to the area? And I think that was it. And we hung out in our hotel, and it was very uneventful. And we could have been arrested because we bought alcohol when we were there. College kids thinking we're all going to get wasted. Well, we didn't. We didn't even drink much. And we went to bed, and it was the lamest night. And the next morning, we're thinking, well, now we have to drive back home, and we have all this booze that we wasted because you can't take it over state line or the line for the enter back into the country. And so we were like, oh my God, we got to dump this out. What a waste. This is terrible. Somebody thought, let's smuggle it. Let's hide it. And then we're like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to get arrested. We're not doing it. So we leave, we cross over the border. Everything goes fine, and we went, man, we could have brought it. They didn't search our car. They didn't even look at us, nothing, and we wasted all that. And the boys in the back seat started laughing. And we're like, what? And they're like, it's in the trunk. We brought it all. And we're like, would we have gone to jail for that? Had they looked in the car?
It would have not been an enjoyable rest of the day.
I can't believe you guys.
Listen, if you were bringing it back to distribute it and sell it, well, that's one thing. But you were stupid kids that just broke a rule, and they probably would have.
We were like, we didn't want to waste our money.
Threw some fines at you and given you a good tongue lashing is probably all that would happen. People smuggle it all the time, and now I think they actually give you some leeway on bringing some stuff back. But at the time, they were really hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long time ago, and they said they didn't tell us because they couldn't trust us to act cool and not be suspicious, and so they just didn't tell us, and we came back with it all, and we were like, that was a dangerous game. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're so dumb. That was my only one night stint in Canada.
Well, one of these times we'll have to go up there, do blackjack. My wife and I, we were a team. Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't have really won as much as we did if she weren't also at the table, and vice versa. And so we established a pretty good, probably pretty illegal system for winning every time that we went
both
up there.
like to do illegal things in Canada, apparently.
So you go to Canada, break the law. That's it.
That guy was right. The crime rate is terrible there.
Yep, they're too polite. They're too polite to do anything. So as long as you do it there, they'll just say, "What's that about?" and they'll let you go.
What's that about?
What's that about?
You can't do that, eh?
Exactly. So, but yeah, I haven't been back up there in a while. I think I stayed at a campground and did the falls one time, since then. But I've tried to keep my money out of spending overseas and spend it local economy, and quit giving all your money to countries that hate you and don't line up with your. We're talking about too much about politics. We got to talk about something else.
Can't you go just do blackjack here in town at the gaming place?
There wasn't blackjack around here. It was not legal. There wasn't.
Is there any? I've never been to Hollywood Gaming. Is that a
There's no
thing?
blackjack there.
Oh.
No, it's slot machines. Recently, as in the last 10 years, Cleveland, and if Cleveland had existed, that's where I would have probably played my blackjack instead of driving 3 hours up into Canada, 45 minutes up the road. That's probably how it would have went down. But it didn't exist, so Canada was your only option. And Canada's allowed you to gamble at 19, where Cleveland would have been 21, and I would have been too young to do what I was doing in Cleveland.
that interesting how so many other countries you can do certain things at like 18, 19, 16, but here everything's like 21. Is that just because we can't be trusted? We're too dumb.
If I'm floating legislation where I'm introducing something new into the culture and I'm unsure whether or not it's going to have a good effect or a bad effect, I'm going to put limitations that maybe mitigate the downside of whatever I'm throwing out there. So somebody was talking about it and they said, hey, you know what? If you vote for this thing, we'll make it 21. And they're like, okay, fine. We'll expose only adults to it and we protect the children a little bit. That's how I picture some of this stuff going down. I don't know if there's any science behind any of it where they establish that, because our brains aren't fully formed and we're immature and we can take things. But we could do that with a lot of other things that don't have, age requirements. So it's got to be something.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. Like 16 to drive a car, but 18 for like tobacco products or something, or I don't know. It's just,
it's got to be something
kind of random
like that.
to me. Yeah. What else you got?
All right. So a lot of, and I said no politics, but this is a little bit politics, more that the evilness of the state of the entire freaking globe.
Oh gosh.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to throw out some, some of my bias opinions here, and that's what they are. I don't know anything more than you do.
Unpopular opinions.
That's it.
That's what we're here for.
And so in the UK, there were some tolerance for gang raping kids. Okay, within
what?
Gang raping kids, so 1,000 kids were raped, and there was a cover up in the exposure and the pursuit of the people who did that damage. And so there's a big dust up in the UK about how, people in political roles could,
This is recently?
like today. Yeah. Like,
jeez.
So my bias is I think that a lot more of that kind of stuff happens in the political realm because, again, we are fallible creatures. And when given access to resources and power, do we usually go in a good direction or a bad direction?
You noble with it or not?
And especially if you have an entire, group of people who help one another get away with it. So in my mind, I picture a lot of these soulless people who, are preying upon young girls, like the Epstein Island stuff. But there's so many stories of this happening. Like, it's not a stretch to think that this is more prevalent than we would hope that it would be, and how tolerant. Like, if you were in a group, like you and I, probably, more moral creatures than what happens in Washington, D.C. But if, let's just say you were in a group, you found out that somebody within that group was preying upon children, right? Then it would be pretty obvious that you and I would out the shit out of it because of how heavily we disagree with that behavior, right?
Yeah.
Now, and this is how I think it goes down, if I can tempt you into doing something and having dirt on you, then I can control you when you find something that I did because I've got dirt on you. Now, you're less likely to out me because of what I was able to concoct that either legitimately framed you as a, let's just say you're a congressman and you go for a little bit of partying and you're around some stuff that you shouldn't have been around, but you're with a lot of other people. Maybe you're not even partaking. And I come along with you and say, hey, I got video evidence that you were talking to a 14-year-old girl. I can, in 2 seconds, put out a hit piece on you that destroys your career. I won't do that as long as you ... And I think in politics, having leverage over another human being has a lot of capital, right? You can get away. And so I think half of the Epstein Island people was just a mechanical
bunch of blackmail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the more blackmail, like that would be, if I did run for Congress, I would want to see how quickly that somebody would set me up for one of those leverage events to happen. Because I'm sure it happens when you're young and impressionable and you want, to sit on some kind of committee, that the offerings happen as you just want to be included in things. And when you're out on the outside, you're probably really likely to take the bait. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you see that in like TV shows and movies all the time where they'll send in somebody to stage something that looks a certain way, and then they get a bunch of photos and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, these photos make it look like you were doing this.
Exactly. And then you're terrified. Then you're terrified that if that comes out, even if you didn't do anything, it wouldn't matter. They can squash you like a bug.
I mean, that's what I think is a lot of the cases in this whole Diddy thing with his parties.
It's the same. It's an extension of the Epstein thing. I think they will always pick a fall person, right, to be able to set a bunch of people up and have leverage, and they can keep their distance about having that leverage, but keep that blackmail alive for as long as they need it. So when, we got this deep state stuff, and you got these people that are, you couldn't even name a deep state actor, right? You could say it has the markings of something deep state, but I couldn't name you a deep state participant.
Dumb question. Yeah. What's deep state?
Really?
I'm clearly not up on this.
Okay, so deep state are the controlling factors behind government of those people who, to establish them, they've got roots deep into the system. And if they don't want something to happen, they can make something not happen. They can skirt the laws and the regulations. Those things don't really apply to themselves. And so, like, when we would expect as moral people that if it was known that there was some kind of Epstein Island thing and there were a bunch of connected people, that story would be in the news in 39 seconds because the media would eat that shit up, that it's career enders and it's outing. And so that would be like red meat. A deep state would have such controls that if they didn't want a story to go anywhere, that story wouldn't go anywhere. They've got such roots in it that they could control things that you would think are uncontrollable.
It's sort of like that power that they have to get away with things.
Yeah, so not only controlling the people that you would have the leverage and blackmail, but having such a control of the system that if, it would defy the gravities that were involved in that system. That would be the deep state.
Like, it's so corrupt, it ends, like, with them.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no telling on them kind of thing.
And I think a lot of politicians, like, they use this as a ploy to get elected, where they're going to take down the deep state, right? Now, if there is a deep state, and if it does have the roots that could defy the gravities of law and process, it is insulated from being gotten rid of, right? It is not the anomaly. It is what the system is built upon. Okay? And so, like, you'll watch some of these things, like George Soros has been linked with the deep state as a person that has a lot of resources. They fund a lot of things happening, right? A lot of purchasing of media and controlling narratives and being able to, control how things are talked about in politics. Well, he wants to buy a grouping of newspapers, right? And the government has to decide whether or not the interests of this person is legal, right? Yeah. And so, like, if it was an Elon Musk and he had to go through some kind of regulatory channels to get approval, it would take probably 3 months longer to get that regulatory approval. With George Soros, he got fast-tracked to approval on buying more newspapers. So, you got a bunch of people in the legislature that want to end the deep state, and something like that happens. Okay, you would expect as two people say, is somebody going to take an eye on that and show me the math on it, that how, like, what conversations and what payments and what did he have to do to get something that should not be allowed to be fast-tracked to be fast-tracked? But it's like everybody's like looking around like, how'd that happen? And those are the people that we are supposed to be looking at that kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out, hey, how did that one slide through like it was on slime, which it was, and these other ones over here take its good old time and go through regulation processes.
Because no one wants to rock that boat. It's too dangerous.
So that deep state, you can always tell, not necessarily being able to call out who the deep state is, but you sort of see the profile of what feels deep statey. That's not a word, but
deep statey.
It feels deep statey when things happen, outside of how normal things happen. It got some deep statey help.
Yeah.
So that, and we start with the pedophilia and the predation on young kids as like the opener into this conversation, because there aren't people who will defend that kind of behavior, whether or not it's like you use the deep state to help your interest in investing in the stock market. Well, you're gonna have opposition somewhere that say, oh, that's your right and whatever.
Yeah.
The deep state controlling things like guns and freedom of, like, those are ones that are going to be more debate, and you can kind of cloud over the debate. But pedophilia is one you would hope all reasonable people would tackle that thing with verve. And yet there's a Epstein Island that had a ton of people that visit and partook into the partying nature of soliciting and partaking in young people for sexual gratification. And those people's names are not being floated into the public domain. Somebody's got control of that list, and I want to know who is stopping that from letting all the rest of us know who was involved in that.
Well, and I feel like there could be a whole bunch of people. I mean, that list could be full of people in power that are like, if this gets out, I'm coming after you, they're coming after you, they're coming after you, your family's gone, you're gone. Like, imagine the threats to the person that they know has that information. I wouldn't want that information. It would be too dangerous.
Okay, so let's just say I'm on an oversight committee where it's my job to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I went to the island and I did the thing. And I'm the guy that has to pull the lever on the investigation. How likely am I going to pull that freaking lever? So if there's a function of government that the lever's not being pulled, that would be my first freaking conversation and saying, it's suspected that lots of bad stuff's happening. Why aren't you pulling that lever? So either you are directly involved and you don't want the fruit of whatever happens to come out there, or you have a controller out there that has made damn sure that you're never going to pull that lever. And my investigation will go to you and all of those factors. Give me names of the people who are about to, because you're ended no matter what. I'm going to make sure of it. Yeah. So you might as well like sit you down at the room just like they do common criminals and say, you're going to tell me or I'm going to find out. And it's going to be better for you if you just tell me who's your controllers that are making you not pull that lever. That's my starting conversation. Now, do you think that it's prevalent? Do you think that professional people, when they think they can get away with something, do the same shit that they would prosecute somebody on the outside for doing?
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
So do you think judges drive drunk and they get away with it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think people that are on a committee for Schedule 1 drugs, do you think they do drugs themselves?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think like cocaine and guns and illegal everything, they are consuming more so because they know they can get away with it?
More so, I don't know, maybe. But 100% they're not saying no. They're not innocent in it. I'm sure hypocritical, but yeah, maybe more so.
Okay, did you know that in our legislature, they have a slush fund, okay, that has millions of dollars in it? And you know what the slush fund's sole job is?
No.
Is to pay off women who have had sexual relationships with members of Congress, and they pay them off for their silence.
I have heard about this.
They have a dedicated fund that pays off for silence in the legislature.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know what it was called, but I have heard of such a thing as there are funds somewhere that go to pay women or people, whistleblowers of whatever kind, that sort of get entangled in these politicians. And
so it happens so often. They actually, they have a restroom for our legislature. They have a payoff fund for our legislature. So it is just a normal function that they're going to go there, have sex with people, possibly rape someone, and pay those people off. Like that blows my mind that there's it's not only government saying, oh, you broke the cardinal rule of holding yourself to a higher standard. It's like, nah, it's going to happen. Let's set up a little fund to, make it go away super quick.
God, it's so twisted and sickening. And it's like, it feels like you can't do anything about it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing.
That is the most disappointing thing as a taxpayer and a citizen, that you think something's going to happen and there's going to be so much outrage that it's just going to end. But it's almost like, when you cut yourself and you get a really cut and it burns real bad, but then you almost hack your arm off and you barely feel it. It's almost like that, where we have this tolerance where we get so outraged about this, but then this happens, and it's like a deadening where it's so big we don't know what to do with it. We're looking for somebody that's going to take up our outrage and make it just as much outrage, but then it goes, wah, 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 and it goes into absolutely nowhere. That's sort of like where the deep state begins all the way through the most egregious things.
Yeah, and I think even people that are not so involved, even the outsiders and the citizens could maybe see something that might be perceived as an injustice, but those people will point out what's in it for you. Oh, yeah, maybe that's not great. It's not a good thing, but look what you get out of it. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm sure they had their reasons. Like if someone's going to benefit from it, it's, well, that's not so bad then if you think of it this way. And it's almost like they can even manipulate people too. So then who stops it? No one.
Well, and that's the thing. If there are more people that are doing the bad thing than the people who would be outraged by it, then it lives forever.
Yeah.
Right? If there's one or two people misbehaving, it's easy to gang tackle that and get rid of it. So that gives me a sense where this is so thick and so rooted in that it is going to take metaphorically nuclear explosions to be able to get rid of enough of the people who are participants in it so that the people who are not participants can root it out. You know what I mean? But I think, that this group that Trump is bringing in, they feel like they can uproot it. I disagree. I think that no human being without totally disrupting our form of government has the ability. I think it's almost like the Area 51 stuff. You're like, as soon as I'm president, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to say, I'm going to bring all the evidence of alien incursions and I'm going to just show you it all. And then you go see how deep it is and like, oh shit, if I tell them about this, we are effed, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like that. It's so bad. This isn't about a little superficial, there's a green guy and whatever. This ruins everything. People die because of this and total mania happens after it.
Yeah, that's why anytime I hear about a politician going into office, whether it's president or whoever, and they sort of either change their stance on something or they don't do something they say they were going to do or whatever. And you hear all these people start crying lies. They were lying. They were lying. And I always say, do you not honestly think for even a second that they got there, actually was presented with information and went, oh, shit, I can't do what I said I was going to do.
Exactly.
And it wasn't a lie. It was just, I had no idea this is what I was facing. And now we have to pivot.
Yeah. But you could even make TV series and movies about the corruption that is actually true, right? And they can still continue to do that thing after everybody knows about it. And we just cliche it. Like if a representative lies, right? Mm-hmm. We already know they lie. So it's not like, I would love it to be if you break any law. You're a legislature, you break a law, you're out. Like, it's not even, we got to wait to get someone elected, whatever. It's one of the rules you break that people have to depend on you and be able to trust you so that if you lie one time, you're just walked out with the sergeant at arms and you're just done, right?
Yeah.
But it's the opposite of that, where we've just come to expect that these fallible people are going to be able to get away with stuff that should be deal breakers. And we get pissed about it, but we allow it to continue to happen.
Yeah. I mean, and you've even said that you've known people that were sort of entering the game, so to speak, that were honest, good people that seem to want to make a change, and they get in the thick of it and find that they feel like they can't.
That what they thought going in wasn't even a possibility. Because of how the game is structured, you can't just have some bright-eyed person walking in there as an idealist and making things better. They will trample the shit out of you, steal your soul, leverage you, and blackmail you into submission. That's what our government actually is.
And if you are the good, moral, do right kind of person, they will paint you otherwise.
They'll destroy you.
Yeah. Oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
Don't listen to them. They're going to hurt people with their crazy ideas, and you can't trust them. They're probably a spy. They're not even from this country, and all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely destroy you. That's what government does. So really the takeaways are, number one, nobody's bringing down the deep state. It's just not going to happen. The deep state is good at destroying people. That's their number one thing. So if they want something destroyed, it's going to be destroyed. It's insulated. So their second obligation after being really good at destroying people is insulating themselves from being destroyed. Just like the proper parasite that they are, right? They insulate themselves from being, destroyed. So if they didn't destroy you, then the people that are doing their bidding get destroyed, but they don't.
Yeah.
They can live in the shadows and they will survive forever. And so, again, if it were me and I want to get rid of the deep state, it would need two things, right? I would hold it at a different spot. So I'm going to pick a place in Tennessee. I'm going to say, this is our new government building. Nobody's invited until I invite them, right? And then I'm going to bring in every single new person that has absolutely zero connection, doesn't even want to be there. So I'm going to bring jurors in rather than people who want the job. The people who want the job, there's probably a reason. So I'm going to fill a room up with a bunch of people, and as chaotic mess as that's going to be, I know for sure that there's nobody in that room that owes anybody else in that room anything. And I'm going to keep you separated so that you're not wheeling and dealing, because the first deal that you make, right, might be the one that then corrupts this system just like the other system.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence needs to be the buffer between wheeling and dealing, saying, hey, I'm going to vote for your thing, but the next time legislation comes in, I want you to insert this thing for me, right? Now, the first level of corruption has happened. Multiply that by 1 million, and that's what our government is. A bunch of people that make deals where somebody does something for you, so you do something for them, and then you're beholden to them for all time. Couple that in with bad behaviors and the blackmail we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And if you ever see your representative doing something that's way out of characteristic, that should be a flag that says the reason they did that is because they hold something on them.
Yes, they are now one of them. They got absorbed into it. Something's up, and now they're back in that game.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even bother picking a new building and slating a bunch of new people in there, because it would only be, when I stop paying attention to it, one cycle for human beings to create the same kind of corruption in the new building that's happened in the old building. But the pursuit of power, the people that go to Washington should be people who have already made it for themselves, right? Because if you have no ambitions to further something, you're less likely to buy into corruption because you've already made it, right?
Yeah.
This is your public service where you actually take a downgrade to do public service as a sacrifice to bring your knowledge or your skill back into the building, and then you should be dispatched super quick. After you've done your little service, get your ass out of there and bring the next person through.
When I was living down south, I was living next to this little town in Alabama where I realized the mayor of the town, being mayor was his side job. He had a full-time job that he went to Monday through Friday. This is what I do. And then when I can, I go to these little events and ribbon cuttings and sign things and have meetings because I'm also the mayor of this little town. And nowhere else do you see that. It's always just the career politician, this is what I do.
That's
this
my
is
job.
my livelihood.
I'm a politician as a job.
Yeah.
Should not be an effing thing.
Yep.
Have you ever driven around Washington, D.C.?
In 8th grade, so too long ago to remember.
When you go there, you can smell the money. Like every car that's on the road, every building that's been built, you can see like the waste, the hemorrhage of money that comes off of that place. And it attracts all of the vultures, all of the really bad, ill-intentioned people, and they find ways to be involved. And there are a million different ways to be able to slurp off of the government tit if you go to Washington, D.C. So my building in Tennessee, it's going to be a wooden building, not a marble one, right? Nobody's going to be able to go there and stay there. I want less interactions with people so they're not wheeling and dealing and compromising their principles. I want them to be able to program their principles into an AI, and the AI does the dealing and lines things up. So that in one of the Doge, have you been following Doge, by the way? All right. So Doge is going to break down government and do some efficiencies and parse things out that are contributing to the high cost of government, right?
Okay.
And so, for instance, if you had like the rural broadband project, I think it was in the billions of dollars, right? Connecting rural communities that didn't have the populations to be able to support somebody running infrastructure in there. So the government shopped away, so we're going to spend this money and get internet to people who companies won't run anything to. Mm-hmm. How many rural, after the money has been spent, how many rural connections do you think were made after spending into the billions of dollars?
Probably not many.
Zero.
Oh,
Zero
God.
thing. And here's the way I think it, and I don't know this for facts, so don't quote me, but the original contract was given to Elon Musk to do Starlink and distribute connections using whatever. But he became, Elon wasn't wasn't a fan of the current administration. They weren't looking to this guy. They didn't want to give him any money and whatever.
Yeah.
So they went another route, and they wanted to deprive the person that can do it to spend the money with people that can. And again, it just became a slush fund of, handing out money to people who are just like, you're going to give this to me? I can't perform the job. And those people kick it back into government by making contributions. And it just becomes this laundering system of spending government money. You get some money, and then you send it back my way, and then we'll do the deal again.
Yep. I mean, could you even sort of see that in the whole education department too?
100%. 100%.
Something that wasn't even supposed to be there indefinitely.
Yeah. You can't have a noble program when it comes to the federal government because you can't keep the vultures away. And if you can't, if you're not naming the deep state and what their controls have, if you put any money, it could be in the Don't Kick Puppies program, and they will find a way to siphon it off, make it somebody else's fault in case something goes down, but they will suck on that tit until the money's gone and they move into a different direction.
And make it look or sound a certain way to the people so that anyone wanting to change it looks like a nutcase.
Absolutely.
What do you mean, cut the education department? That sounds like a terrible thing until you actually look into it and you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. But it sounds bad. What do you mean, how could you not want to kick puppies? It's the Don't Kick Puppies thing, and nobody wants to kick puppies. Oh, by puppies you mean something else. Oh.
But nobody will look the second layer deep into finding out, like, if 1 penny out of 2 billion made it to not kicking puppies, if you get rid of it, it was about the puppies, not about the inefficiency of spending money that doesn't actually get to the thing. So when you take Department of Education, how much of the actual money gets down to actually the product that it was intended to hit? Almost none. It's about administrative salaries, and it's about bureaucracy, and it's about political spending, and everything except for the end product of making education better. Yeah. So when, Doge is going to say this, okay, on the federal level, you can't sieve money down deep enough because the more money you spend, the more waste that actually happens. So they move it to the states. You have a better chance of it happening in the states because you can see what's going on, and the deep state has a harder time, stacking itself to take advantage of something that happens on the state. But the state is going to do the same thing. There's deep state on the state as well because it is a big bureaucracy as well. So then you put it down on the local level. Well, if the money's being spent on the local level and there's a bunch of council people who are responsible for distribution of the money, you can dig into that freaking person. They're not shrouded in the legislation that's hard to read, hard to interpret, and taking their cut off of the top kind of thing. I bet you 90% of the money would get to the end goal and the pupil versus 1% getting to the end goal in the pupil. So that's when I picture what Doge or the government efficiency overseers are going to do. They're going to find out that it's not the people so much, but it's the wrong utility to get money to people is having a bureaucracy that has to administrate when it could be done on the local level. So it's going to be the overall theme is that anything that you give the government is going to get broken. Anything. Like you can bring your favorite benefit up, even if even if that benefit works really well, whether it be Social Security or Defense Department or anything. It's going to always have the same measure. We gather all this money, put it on the top. At the end result, it has very little product, or at least not enough to justify the expense that you put in the top, and say, oh, they shouldn't be managing that over and over and over again. But yet we still, people will tell you today that it's a lack of money into education is our problem. That's the deep state putting in the ear saying, put more money at the top. Well, no shit. If you're scraping 90% of the value off of education spending into things that have nothing to do with education, then when you put more money into the top, your 90% is going to claim more money. You get to make more money. And so that, like I said, improper use of a tool. Government's good at breaking shit. So if you want something broken, give it to the government and they'll figure 1,000 ways of breaking it.
So speaking of being sneaky and hiding things, I actually wanted to ask you this, I think the last time we met, and I totally forgot. And somehow this is a little off the subject, but somehow this has made me think of it. Can we go back to the drones? Yeah. Are these drones still over New Jersey, by the way? Is that still happening?
They'll just disappear.
So I gotta admit, my first thought when I woke up New Year's Day and heard about the ISIS dude in New Orleans, and then I think there was another, didn't somebody blow up a cyber truck in Las Vegas? Yep. Were these drones, you think, protecting New York?
Maybe.
I'm like, do they know? Did they know something was afoot? Something was happening? Somebody was doing something, and they're like, it's New Year's Eve. What's the big New Year's Eve spot? New York City. But we can't be super obvious, and we're not quite sure, so we're sort of taking this like, just like everybody chill here. If they were looking for something, I think you said, didn't they have like spotlights? Like they were looking for something?
They had spotlights, they had sensors. If they were looking for nuclear material or ordnance of some kind, they were trying to find signatures that looked like something.
I mean, even though these instances didn't happen in that area, could this have been our government caught wind of something? There was a plot for something, and they went, we're sort of going to just get in place and sort of be on the defensive for a bit.
So does that make you feel better or worse if that's the hypothetical?
I don't know. I don't know. If that is the hypothetical, I say, well, silver lining, we were on the trail of something. We weren't totally blindsided. We had enough intel to sort of take precautions in some form. But we weren't in the right state, and it didn't really... Well, I don't know. I can't really say it didn't save anyone. I don't know. What if we did foil something that could have gone down in New York or that area? I don't know. It's just still so questionable and open-ended that I'm like...
Okay, so let me paint it in its worst possible light.
Okay.
So, let's just say there was a black ops team and that they were charged with being able to find this stuff out, right? Literally every person that talked about it seemed like they had no idea that the whole thing existed. They didn't know we had the technology. They didn't know if they were ours. They didn't even know it was something that they were doing on the background. Everybody that spoke about it seemed very flat-footed that it was even happening. So that's problem number one. Is that
the drones were happening?
That whose they were and what they were doing. So if I'm a governor of a state that it's happening in, then the black ops get the information of the governor that there's an operation happening in their state and you guys should know about it. So there's a group that's able to, on its own, autonomously be able to run operations, and they don't let anybody know that it's happening. So that's number one, that there's a group that is disconnected from normal government operations, right? Mm-hmm. Number two, who are they, right? And number three, are they good people? So let's just say there's a group of bad people who can use technology, not let any kind of legislator or governor or anybody in the executive branch know something's going on, and had bad intentions like killing somebody, taking somebody out. Are there groups in the United States that have such leeway that they're allowed to operate without having other people know that they're even operating?
Short answer, I think yes.
Okay.
But how do we know those other people weren't just lying, that they did know? like, hey, here's what's happening, and the American people cannot know. And they get there, they say, oh shit, this is a big deal, and it's important people don't panic and don't know. And so they say, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
I think ego is too thick with people that I heard talking, the governor of New Jersey, and the tone. He didn't know what the F was going on. He was starting to push to be able to find out. He was a little annoyed that he didn't know what was going on and people were freaking out about it. Like, I would expect that if they would have known, it would have been more deflecting than the reaction that we, got from them. So the governor was told it was happening. He would make up some kind of things, like it would be a different presentation as far as I'm concerned. So again, if we have these groups that are allowed to on their own, are they noble? Do they have good intentions? Are they accountable to somebody? You would hope that if someone ran an op here in, the United States, that that they would have to let people know that it was actually happening. They would have to be permissed into it. And if it went south, like, who would you blame? Like, let's just say one of those drones crashed into someone's house, killed somebody because of this operation. Literally everybody who I'd called to let them know that this happened would have been flat-footed and have nothing for me. So who would you hold accountable for killing somebody in that house? You wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, I would want to hold our government, because there is no way our government doesn't know anything about these drones. We've said before, they would have shot something down in our airspace coming over. We have the technology to see a person's face in another country from ours. And we can't see this drone or anything about it or where it goes or anything. Nothing? No, I don't buy that. I think they know something. And the fact that it's so hush-hush is like, either it's for our safety not to know, or I guess either way it's our safety. They can't say anything so that who this is meant to affect doesn't know, if that makes sense. If they're like, hey, well, we caught wind of a potential terrorist act on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, we're not going to broadcast that. We know that, but we got to get into position.
Because it allows the person that was going to do the deed a chance to escape and change plans. Okay.
They're tracking me. I better change my plan. So they don't want, that's why I always say people think that because they watch the news, they know something. You honestly think our government will broadcast our most secretive information for the entire world to hear if we are plotting something or trying to capture someone or going after someone that's deadly? You think they're going to broadcast that? No.
Well, all right. So it would be more believable that, okay, so the day that somebody spots something they shouldn't have seen, right? They saw one of these drones, and then we're sitting back and then saying, what are we going to do? The public's going to be, wise to this, and shit's going to spread that's worse than, what we're trying to do here. We can't tell them that we're looking for terrorists, but we can create a cover story and say we're doing geographical surveying for, plate tectonics, and we're looking for, we're going to protect the subway system that a big earthquake's going to happen, right? And so these guys are going around scanning. We're doing LiDAR or ground penetrating radar to find out if there's any fissures under New Jersey. And everybody would be like, oh, okay. Like, they would have walked away from that. So had they known that something that they couldn't say was happening, there would have been a believable cover story so that that same panic didn't happen in the other direction. It would have been a lie, but at least it would have been a logical lie.
Well, maybe not lying and not saying anything at all covers their asses then. If something goes awry and somebody says, well, you lied about this, you're liable. But if you're like, I said nothing. We don't know what this is. It's just, why say anything? Why make the waters muddier? Just be quiet and let us do our thing. Like, what if they did foil a plan? What if they thought something else was happening? And I don't know.
Do you think we will ever know, or is this going to go right into, there's a folder that the Epstein list and the Diddy list is in, and now the real story on the drones are all in this file folder?
Probably.
You think you're gonna know?
I feel like we might know someday.
So here's a way I hope that this works. Okay. And I don't trust the government, so this isn't even, if it even went down this way, I still would mistrust it. So we have elected representatives that are there to do our bidding. I don't have to know what the drones are, but I'm going to look at my representatives, and I sure as hell hope they know what the drones are, because even though they can't tell me, I'm going to look at them and they're going to say, everything's cool, right? I got this. We're looking at this. Can't say it about it, but everything's cool. Now, the committee, like if you'd expect if it's black ops, you can't tell the entire Congress what's going on, but there's certain people who then do know. So you're sitting on the committee that has oversight over black ops, special forces and whatnot, and they know. So then my representatives can go to them, and then they can say, everything's cool. Can't tell you about it, but everything's cool. And then they could turn around and at least make everybody feel good that you can trust us. At least the people who are under control have oversight, but it's not this black group, right, that can just do whatever they want. And even the people that are their representatives have no clue about actually what's going on.
But what if the group has to say so very small because of who you can trust with information? Like when my husband was overseas and he would be on deployments and he would call me and we would talk on the phone. We were not allowed to say anything about anything. Not what he's doing, where he is, what's going on. Absolutely nothing. If you said anything about anything, they would automatically disconnect the call. Had to call from a crazy looking phone number. All kinds of different precautions. And that's just a guy calling his wife. You can't say anything about even where you are or the region or when you'll be home or traveling info. Right. Nothing. So wouldn't you think then that if it was something serious they were trying to prevent or they were involved with, that it would be like, we're not saying anything. We don't know who we can trust. It's a very small group of people, and it's important to keep it a small group of people.
In theory, that math checks. The problem is that vacuum means that if you get one bad person in a group that's not accountable to anyone else, that's where the deep state lives. And I mistrust that there's no counterbalance that would, if there were a bad person, right? We're gonna trust you that you're not gonna tell me anything. But if there's a bad person, you got to tell me how they get rooted out and don't establish themselves as let's say black ops saying you're a Democrat, right? Mm-hmm. And there's an election coming out, and I'm allowed to just operate without any kind of oversight, and I'm allowed to just go take somebody out, right? Mm-hmm. And since there's no oversight, you can totally get away with that because nobody has oversight. So for a good reason, it meant that nobody's paying attention to you. And you're looking around like, nobody's paying attention to me. I'm a fallible human being. Let me just do things off the reservation and be able to totally get away with it without impunity.
What if it was so hush-hush because the threat was not foreign?
What do you mean?
What if they have a threat internal?
Right.
And they were like, we're not telling anyone shit because there's a rat.
I bet you there are more rats on this ship than people. Okay, so do you remember when the first Russian collusion Trump things happened? Right? Do you remember that when that went down?
Vaguely.
Okay, so no. Jim Comey, which was the FBI director at the time, he couldn't publicly say something, so he went. I think it was the Washington Post. He leaked his findings to the Washington Post. So it'd be in the paper. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, so a person that is the director of the FBI, right, leaked information to the public about something that would get public view skewed in a certain direction. Uh-huh. That to me is, if that's normal operating procedure where the rat is the person, like you in the directorship, I'm trusting that you know a lot of stuff that you don't want to get leaked. Which means that you should be really good about keeping things tight-lipped, even if it freaking benefits you. That's why I have such mistrust in those people, because in certain directions, when there's, a terrorist or somebody who is going against the government and is doing treason and is threatening the existence of our government, you would expect that those people would have to have a really, tight circle of people. But you'd also like them to behave that same principle, even things that benefit them. Would you want them to be able to say, here's something that's going to personally benefit me, and I want to use the same power in my directorship, right, when it benefits me? That'd be a misuse of what's granted to you as an elected official.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think we'll ever find out what the drones are?
No. If it's something, you'll never know about it. It'll go right into that same.
I mean, because if you think about it, these terrorist acts were citizens.
Yeah, and that's why like the Diddy list and the Epstein list and Area 51, all of that stuff, I know will never see the light of day ever, because it's dead as far as I'm concerned. Because if it implicates the people who are currently in power, there's no incentive to make those people pay a consequence of whatever. But the Area 51 stuff, like, there's going to be a point where there's nobody left to implicate, and the people who would be embarrassed or get in big trouble for being, a conspirator in there, they'll be long dead. So there's going to be a mathematical reason to bring it out. But then what does that do to the reputation of the United States to know that there was something that went on that didn't have any kind of, national security impacts or whatever, and they still kept it silent? Now we know the government's able to keep things silent against big headwinds from people who really want to find out that information, but the deep state knows how to keep certain things, right, completely hushed, never to be seen. That's one grouping of people. And we have other group that if they want something to be seen, they'll nudge the Washington Post and be able to leak that stuff out into the ether. That's the mistrust right there.
Or leak something to hide something else.
Sure.
Like, let me just get you all looking here.
Yeah, and
while
that's
we're
the
doing
mistrust.
This.
That's the mistrust in government in general, is that they can arbitrarily, just like the judge is not so beholden to the law, that when he's the person who's driving drunk, doesn't go to court and doesn't spend a day. Now, in an ultimate idealistic world, all laws apply to everyone blindly. That is justice to me. So if you drive drunk and you get pulled over and you go to jail and you're like, oh, look, a judge got to serve the same consequences as everybody else, I trust in the law because it applies to everybody uniformly. But if the director of the FBI does something that if I did, I would go to jail, well, there's two-tiered justice system, and the government and the deep state knows that they have control of the one tier, right? And everything applying to us, completely separate tier.
Or we talked about too these drones possibly being a distraction, like
could be
diversion, which again would explain them not saying anything. If they had a perfectly logical, reasonable explanation for having these drones, like, oh, we're looking at tectonic plates and the whatever, people would go, oh, okay. And then they'd probably be over it.
For sure.
But
if they wanted to be a spectacle.
Yeah. The questioning and what's going on and keeping our attention on it by not saying anything, what then were they doing over here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ooh. Well, you have to have three things. Number one, is your government competent? All right, you either have to have trust that when they do things, they're doing it because they're good at it, or that when they get it right, it's completely by accident and they're really nincompoops that don't have brain cells to whatever. Number two is your government noble? Are they doing things that because they're right, or are there nefarious people who are just out to enrich themselves and take the benefits they have? So number one is competency. Number two is whether or not they're nefarious. And number three is, do you have expectation that they will tell you the truth? And all of these things, if they existed in that idealistic world, then as a kid, did you say that? Did you believe in the thing that if you asked a cop the truth, they had to tell you the truth? They couldn't lie to you.
Did I believe that?
Did you believe that?
I probably did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like that is the idealistic view that if you really asked because they couldn't lie because they are a public servant, that they can't lie to you. So if like, did you really vote for that? Blah, blah, blah. And like, I cannot tell. You have all Boy Scouts in government.
Yeah.
I think that they are power hungry, nefarious, incompetence. And all three of them. You're really dumb. You're trying to just enrich yourself, and you can't tell a truth if you depended on it. Mm-hmm. That is the government landscape as it is.
Yeah.
They would have to win me over. They would have to say, so our black ops people, I trust that there are portions and pockets of the government that are really good. If we gave it SEAL Team 6 to go out there and do a job, they have balances in there that say that they have an obligation, they go and do it, and they do it really well, and they train every day to be able to do it. That is the pinnacle of competence when it comes to special operations. I don't get the same sense where politicians practice the level of competence. I see. I remember when they had social media people went and testified before Congress, and to watch these 70 and 80-year-olds talk about the different social media and technologies that were out there. All of them were like talking to your grandparents about programming their VCR. They're all idiots. They're all making major decisions that have major, roots in all of this technology, and all of them would struggle to program their VCR. And that makes me really uncomfortable with how incompetent these people really are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see, it could be Biden, it could be Mitch McConnell, it could be all these people that we have seen openly struggle, whether it's because of age or poor health or something, whatever it is. And there's never any, hey, maybe it's time to hang it up. Let's get someone else in here. No, it's just they're career politicians and they'll be there forever and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's like, when do we take the keys from grandma? Never? Oh, well, let's see how that works out.